Well, welcome back to Mum's Garden. Everything in time and space has a name. You give everything a name, and with that name, of course, comes the meaning that you've given it, and you get to see where it is that you're at in your transformation according to the investment of that meaning, and more importantly, the lack of investment in that meaning once it's been through the rigors of time and space, which is constant change, and you see how it is that you're attached to things or not attached to things. And I'm not really attached to anything. I can't find anything that I'm attached to anyway, so in looking at my emotional footprint to things, it's fairly minimal these days. Anyway, this little video is just a follow-up from the one I did over in the orchard the other day, the avocado orchard, about the 4 obstacles to peace, and the last one being the fear of God. And I woke up this morning and I thought, oh well, I should have added a little bit to that, in that I was talking about the portal as an idea, not that it's an actual portal. I mean, it's a portal in as much as when you fall asleep at night and start dreaming, that's a portal from one point of conscious focus to another. But to give it some sort of context, and I referenced it with the example that imagine a child in a supermarket lost from their parents, and the anxiety comes up and everything. So in the Eastern traditions, and you'll find this if you do a deep dive into meditation, or you should find it if you're meditating properly, you'll find that, and I shouldn't say meditating properly, there's not really a proper way, but if you're meditating in a way that you're pushing into consciousness rather than just sitting there quietly. And when I say pushing into consciousness, I mean listening into consciousness, because your mind, let's say the observing self that you think you are, looking at your thoughts, you're listening to those thoughts and giving those thoughts value, etc., etc. And during mind training, you train yourself not to listen to those thoughts, but instead, you're not listening to those thoughts, you're listening to the silence. Right? You're listening to that place in you where there is only peace, and learning to stay there rather than being distracted by the cacophony of thoughts that seem to come in and out to disturb you. So when I say meditating properly, I'm talking about listening, reaching, trying to find words here, but leaning perhaps mentally into that silence. And what happens is you'll find yourself up against the veil of consciousness, up against the edge, up against the limit. So Ramana Maharshi used to teach it as inner inquiry. You would ask, what am I? And you would refuse not to get an answer. You would sit there in silence, listening into the abyss or the void of what is beyond consciousness, the unknown or the unremembered, and you would wait for an answer. That can bring up, and should bring up by necessity, because it's a place of memory, a lot of anxiety. Right now, that occurs because the very first experience of change that the mind experienced as an idea of, albeit illusion, was the slip into the, what would you call it, the potential, or the playing out of potential, the miscreative presentation of the potential for what it is that separation could look like. And right here and now, in this moment, it looks like listening to a video or making a video or any of the things in the dream. So And that's terrifying, very much like a little child in a supermarket being lost in their parents. It's terrifying. There's that separation anxiety, and it brings that all up, right? So when you meditate and when you find the void, when you find the edge of consciousness, it's literally like a precipice. And as you learn to wait there, what happens is all of a sudden there's a movement in your mind, and it's like and somebody asked me about this the other day, if I could describe it better, and I can't really describe it better. It's hard to describe, but there's a kind of a kadunk. And someone else wrote to me and said, oh, I've had that kadunk in my mind. I know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, thank God for that, because most people that you talk to about meditation, it tends to be rather transcendental rather than transformative. And when you say kadunk, I don't know what you're talking about. But there's this kind of dropping down and back for me. Some people experience it as forward and up, like a step. And I remember my teacher Greta explaining it to me one day in doing a session, and she said it's like a step, and that's exactly how I feel, like a very little mezzanine, like that, upper level in your mind or downer level in your mind. And I can't be 100% certain on Jesus's, if you're a New Testament person, I can't be 100% certain on knock on the door shall be open, but that's what I equate it with. I'm willing to be wrong about that, of course, but you just said, no, you're right. Thank you. Confirmation from above. So there you go. Knock and the door shall be opened. What happens beyond the door, let's say, is the space. In Eastern terms, in Eastern traditions, it's been called the void. It's not really a void because there's no lacking God. There's a place where the idea of separation has already been healed, which Jesus fulfilled as the coming and fulfillment of the prophecy through the resurrection from death, as the idea that death underlines everything in the temporal realm. And of course, when you enter into that place of the void, that's what you expect to find, the death, the infinite darkness. But because it's now, how would I put this, filled with grace, filled with the promise of resurrection, of redemption, that place that initially in the Course it says tiny mad idea, at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh, because it's now filled with God's grace. It's like you're carried across it, and I don't know how to talk about that either. It's like you're carried across it by grace, but there's still that tiny moment of terror, right? That's how Jesus talks about it in the Course, tiny moment of terror. And Jesus sort of underplays it a bit, I think. I mean, I know people that have talked to me about having that moment of terror in meditation where they feel like they're being sucked out of their body or sucked out of their mind, or they're losing their mind and stuff like that. And I've experienced it, but I haven't experienced it to a degree that other people say that they have. And when my wife and I were together, she experienced it in meditation once, and it absolutely terrified her. It absolutely made her, she thought she was doing something wrong in meditation. And I tried to tell her, no, you're doing everything right. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. You sit there and you wait, and then there's this sort of zoom or this whoosh. But how would I put this? Having had my illumination first, right, being a top downer, and I'm kind of guessing at this a little bit. There's no written contextual sort of material that I've ever found that's talked about it. I mean, I'm aware that I'm very much a pioneer in some regards, with regard to A Course in Miracles and the experiences that it offers, which is why I'm making all these videos. Hopefully they'll be helpful, but there's nothing that I've ever come across that says this, but I'm thinking that, lesson 10, my thoughts don't mean anything. I'm thinking that the illumination, okay, so in the Course it says, direct union with God relieves you temporarily of all doubt and fear, right? So in my meditations, and I don't generally meditate much anymore in the traditional sort of sense of it, where you sit quietly for extended periods of time, like that. I'm just going to open my mind now at will, and there's light there, but my glasses are fogging up, got tears. You can thank Jesus for that. But the relief of that fear in me is something that I initially was, I guess, too arrogant to be aware of, because I wasn't really doing the work. Wasn't really doing the work immediately after illumination. I was still caught up in the hype of it for several years, and in the power of that light. Like I didn't know what to do with myself. I was just uncontrollable, and I didn't recognize I was uncontrollable, of course. But the beneficence of that experience has stayed with me. And not to say I haven't had moments of confrontation since then with the residue of my association within this avatar that hasn't brought stuff up. It has, absolutely, it has emotional stuff, but nothing to the degree of that deep-seated anxiety that stems from the belief in separation. And I guess that's where I'm going with this, that I've had that belief in separation erased or removed from my mind through that experience. But in the fourth obstacle to peace, that fear of God is the fear of facing again, let's say, that moment, that portal of going back through what you came out of, let's put it that way, not that it really ever happened, going back through that portal to reality. Right? And your first memory of it, that abiding memory that stays in you, is how terrifying it was the first time you came through from the other side. And of course, when you approach it from this side, all of a sudden that memory is like, hang on a minute, I remember this, and it brings up all that angst. And remember, of course, that all anxiety is existential. So whenever you experience any level of anxiety, any moment of anxiety, it's just the tip of an iceberg that leads all the way back to that original belief, that original idea of separation. So if you've got the guts and the faith, you can draw a circle and sit there in that anxiety and continue to offer it to the Holy Spirit, that it might be completely expunged from you. But generally, I think for most people, it's incremental, bit by bit. Jesus talks about it as a gently evolving training program. It's like I'd hate to see what his idea of a rough trip is. Anyway, so Tyna and I, it's nearly the start of the next month, July, coming into July. We're going to start the Zoom meetings. Somebody asked me the other day, where's the link for the Zoom meetings? There isn't one just yet, but we will put it up probably a week out from the first Zoom meeting, so stay tuned. And quite a lot of people are keen to join in those. And we've got some guys, I think, that'll be joining us from our old group If you haven't seen any of the old group meetings, the Zoom meetings, go back and watch some of the early ones where I'm really poking at the bear, and it's kind of fun. You got to laugh. You got to remember that salvation and the undoing of what never was, as an idea of a humbling of pride and a leveling of character and all of that sort of stuff. You've got to see it as fun, or you won't enjoy the ride. You've got to be glad you're getting out of here. You've got to be glad you're waking up, because the steps, like Jesus says in the Bible, the way is hard and steep, and there's not many people found on that way. But the road to purgatory is it's wide, and everybody's going in there because it's easy, So we're going to do our first Zoom, I think, on, and this is something I've just discovered just a few days ago. I did have something else in mind, but like the Spirit sort of directs. So MGTOW, which is a social phenomena that's happening at the moment, or a global Western world global phenomena anyway, where makes me laugh just talking about it. And men walking away from the idea of committing to a heterosexual relationship or anything like that. And it's just like, well, what do you expect? But on that level, on that level. And I don't mean what do you expect as in a masculine sort of degrading the feminine sort of way. I mean, what do you expect? Because the whole nature of time and space is completely chaotic and crazy anyway. Like, what else can happen? And I just wanted to break down the levels in that, because it's really clear to me, and it's a really great example of playing out the divine relationship in the physical nature. So that should be fun, or the playing out of the physical relationship as a symbolic representation of the divine relationship. And I'm not talking about divine masculine or divine feminine. There's no such thing, and that's another. And I know everybody will tune out now because that's become very popular, like chakras, and there's no such thing as chakras really either. But even though the phenomena of it proves that there is, just remember there is no world, right? So none of it means anything, right? Lesson number one, nothing I see means anything. But in being able to track your own progress, in being able to be the witness to your changes and your transformative process, it's helpful, and Jesus always talks about it in the Course as, unless you know what the ego has in store for you, how are you going to be able to recognize it when it comes along? You'll just be this gimp that, why is this happening to me? So keep your mind focused on peace, on the kingdom, a peaceful, heavenly state of mind. And when something pops up to disturb that, be honest about it. Look at it. It's like, all right, I've manifested this. This is my projection come back to me. This is my karma, my cause and effect relationship, whatever it is. Keep your finger on your nose, right? I'm not separate from anything, right? There's no such thing as separation. If everything is God, what am I separate from? Because it must include me, right? What am I separate from? Keep your finger on your nose. There's no partly my fault and partly your fault. I'm totally, right? Salvation, I'm totally responsible. I get the results of my own thinking, and that's how you learn. So anyway, I love you guys. Subscribe and like. Tyna always gets happy when I remind you guys to subscribe and like. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to cover on that. All good. We'll leave it there. Peace.